The palace didn't just close the door on Meghan, they erased her as if she had never existed, and the moment that final decision was made, it wasn't polite, it wasn't careful, it wasn't even discussed, it was executed like a silent verdict already decided long before she realized she was standing trial. And here's where the story turns from cold rejection into something far darker. Something that feels less like family conflict and more like a calculated removal. Because when Meghan sent her final plea, she believed there was still a thread left to pull, a crack in the wall she could slip through, a memory of belonging that could still be revived. But what she didn't know, what no one told her, was that the decision had already been emotionally signed long before the ink ever touched that paper. William didn't hesitate. No consultations, no delays, no second opinions. Just one pen, one moment, one word, denied. And not denied in the way that suggests reconsideration later, not denied with diplomacy, not denied with any trace of softness, but denied like a final lock being slammed into place. And hidden beneath that denial, buried where no one outside that room would immediately see it, was the detail that changes everything. Her name, gone. Removed from the emergency contact list tied to his children. Completely erased. Think about that for a second, not just socially excluded, not just emotionally distant, but officially cut off in a scenario where seconds matter, where lives hang in the balance. If something happened, her phone would never ring. Not now. Not ever again. And still, she believed she could fix it. That's the part that almost feels heartbreaking if it wasn't so dangerously naive. She walked into that meeting holding on to something fragile hope, maybe, or denial disguised as hope. She spoke about missed birthdays, about watching from the outside, about wanting just a small place back inside the family she once stood beside. Not asking for power, not asking for status, just asking for presence. But William didn't interrupt her. He didn't react. He let her speak, every word, every plea, every attempt to rebuild something that had already been buried. And then he cut straight through it. No emotion, no hesitation, just a line that didn't just reject her request, it rejected the entire idea of trust ever being restored. And then she made the mistake. The one mistake that turned a closed door into a permanently sealed one. She brought up the children, not vaguely, not carefully, directly. Why can't she see them? Why has that access been completely blocked? The moment those names left her mouth, something shifted, not loudly, not dramatically, quietly, and somehow that made it worse. Because William didn't explode, he froze. The kind of stillness that signals a line has been crossed so deeply that it can't be undone. His response wasn't angry. It was final. You don't get to ask that. And in that moment, the entire dynamic changed. She wasn't being treated like a family member arguing her case anymore. She was being treated like a risk. She left shaken but not finished. That same evening, one more message was sent. One last attempt. Not even to reverse the decision, just to soften it, to change the wording, to leave a crack in the narrative that could still be salvaged later. But nothing came back. No reply, no acknowledgement, just silence. And in a place like that, silence isn't empty, it's loud, it's intentional. It's the kind of answer that doesn't just say no, it says you are no longer part of the conversation. And then came the part that no one outside those walls saw coming. Her photograph gone, removed from the gallery like it had never belonged there in the first place. No explanation, no announcement, just quietly taken down as if someone was correcting a mistake that should have been fixed long ago. Staff noticed. Of course they did. And even the newest among them understood what it meant instantly. This wasn't distance. This wasn't cooling off. This was erasure. Clean, precise, irreversible. But here's where it stops being just about rejection. Because none of it was actually about that final appeal sitting on William's desk. That letter was just the trigger. The real story, the real reason this escalated so brutally had already been unfolding in secret for weeks. Quiet actions, hidden moves, things happening behind closed doors that no one publicly connected at the time. And once those details surfaced, once that pattern became visible, the decision suddenly stopped looking harsh and started looking inevitable. Because what Meghan had been doing quietly, persistently, without anyone's knowledge, wasn't just crossing boundaries, it was redefining them. And the moment the palace realized exactly how far those lines had been pushed, everything changed. Not gradually. Instantly, the trust wasn't damaged, it was shattered. And once that kind of fracture happens inside a system built on control and protection, there's no repair, only removal. And the night it all truly broke wasn't in that meeting room. It was somewhere far more unexpected. The night it all truly broke didn't look like a scandal at first. No flashing headlines, no dramatic confrontation, no warning signs that anything irreversible was about to unfold. It was just a charity reception, polished smiles, controlled conversations, cameras flashing at exactly the right moments. But beneath that calm surface, something was already shifting. Something subtle but deliberate. And Meghan felt it the second she stepped into that room. Because right there at the center of everything stood Catherine, perfectly placed, perfectly framed, with the children positioned around her like a living declaration of the future. Not random, not accidental, strategic, and whether Meghan could prove it or not didn't matter, because in that moment it felt personal. She watched, she calculated, she tried to read between movements, between glances, between the way attention naturally drifted toward Catherine without effort, and the conclusion she reached, right or wrong, hit her like a quiet humiliation. This wasn't just about being sidelined anymore, this was about being replaced in plain sight. So she reacted, not carefully, not quietly. She confronted a palace aide with a sharpness that cut through the controlled atmosphere of the entire event. Why is Catherine always pushed forward while I'm kept out? And then the line that changed everything, the one that turned frustration into something far more dangerous. You're using the children as a wall to keep me out, aren't you? That sentence didn't just echo in that room, it traveled. Straight into reports, straight into files. Because in a system like that, words don't disappear, they get documented. And while that moment alone was enough to raise alarms, it wasn't the real problem, it was just the surface crack. Because behind it, something far more serious had already been happening, quietly, repeatedly, and completely outside the boundaries everyone believed were still being respected. For weeks, letters had been moving through unseen channels, handwritten, personal, directed to the children, delivered not through official routes, not through approved contact, but through someone who still had access, a former nanny with just enough connection to slip past notice. And here's the detail that turns this from emotional into explosive. No one inside the core family knew. Not William, not Catherine, not even Harry. These weren't gestures being made in the open, they were actions carried out in silence, building a pattern that no one could see until it was already too late. When the truth surfaced, it didn't arrive gently. It arrived as evidence, not speculation, not rumor, proof. And the moment William saw it, hesitation disappeared completely. Because this wasn't about interpretation anymore. It wasn't about miscommunication. It was about boundaries being crossed again and again without permission, without transparency, without restraint. And in a structure built on control, that kind of pattern doesn't get forgiven, it gets shut down. The fallout moved fast. The nanny gone. No explanation needed. Everyone understood. And then the detail that feels almost too heavy to ignore, one of the letters never reached its destination. Addressed to the youngest. Intercepted, not destroyed, not dismissed, preserved. Locked away inside the same file that would later be used to deny everything. A message written with intention turned into documentation. Something meant to be read with warmth, filed as proof of intrusion. And that shift from affection to evidence is where everything becomes irreversible. Catherine learned the truth not through whispers, not through speculation, but directly. Reported, confirmed, and her reaction wasn't explosive, it was decisive. Because in that moment, this stopped being about tension between adults. It became about her children being pulled into something they never chose. And once that realization settled, whatever space existed for compromise disappeared completely. Protection took over. And protection in that environment doesn't negotiate. Harry didn't even know, not at first. Not while all of this was unfolding behind closed doors, building momentum, shaping decisions that would later hit him all at once. When he tried to reach out to find clarity, to reconnect with someone he trusted, that line was already cut. Not by accident, by instruction. The system had already adjusted. Doors were already closing. And he was still outside, unaware that the structure he once relied on had quietly shifted against him. By the time Meghan told him the truth, it wasn't a discussion, it was a revelation. The letters, the secrecy, the risk, everything laid out in a way that couldn't be softened or reframed. And his reaction wasn't anger at first, it was stillness. The kind that comes when something fundamental breaks, not loudly, but deeply. Because this wasn't just about the palace anymore, this was about trust inside his own life. And once that realization settled in, everything else, the rejection, the decisions, the silence, started to make a different kind of sense. Not easier, not acceptable, but undeniable. And when he finally stood across from William, there were no barriers left, no formal language, no protective distance, just two brothers facing a reality neither of them could undo. One asking if there was still something left to save, the other already knowing the answer, because by then this wasn't about a single decision, it was about a pattern that had already crossed the line. And once that line is crossed inside something this controlled, there is no way back. Only consequences that keep unfolding long after the final word has already been spoken.